Now, you don't have to look too far into our world in which we live to see that people who are walking around, the baggage that they are carrying has damaged them and is causing them pain. So what are we going to do about this? Are we even here, perhaps carrying baggage that has caused us pain and damage? And where do we go from here? These are the questions that we're going to look at tonight. Now, it's important to understand, really, is when do we pick the baggage up? In our life, when we carry things, experiences, pains, hurts, disappointments, when do we really pick those things up? Well, oftentimes we pick them up when we're children. I think it was Saint Ignatius Loyola, who was the founder of the Jesuit religious order, said, "Give me a child till they're 7 and I'll have them for life." Now, what he was saying was that during the first 7 years of childhood, we are influenced by various things that happen, behaviors and attitudes, and the way that we're treated and words that are spoken over us, and those can then shape us for the rest of our lives. And oftentimes, that's when we pick up the baggage which determines how we're going to be for the rest of our days. Now, the thing is, maybe, you can think of your own childhood experiences and perhaps things that have affected you when you were a child that still affect you today. I can think of one particular moment, I think Keith can really sympathize or empathize with me, is, not that he was with me at the time, but when I was about 3 or 4, I wasn't even born yet, when I was about 3 or 4, I was on the beach in Guernsey. Beautiful beach called Varzon Bay. Fantastic. Anybody been there? Yeah, see, there's some people here that's been there. It's great. Now, I was about 3 or 4, and what happened is I took my little bucket, and I went down to the sea, and I filled it up with water, and the idea was I was going to bring it back to Mum and Dad. And I don't know what I was going to do, perhaps I was going to chuck it over them, I don't know. But anyway, I was bringing it back up the beach, and then suddenly I was confronted by this big black dog, and it was bouncing around in front of me and barking, big teeth, monster dog. Actually, it was probably a tiny little chihuahua, but I was small, remember? Okay, I was only small. But anyway, it stopped me from getting back to Mum and Dad, and I started crying. And the next thing I remember my hero, my father, coming towards me, picking me up, and taking me safely back up the beach. I've scared of dogs ever since. He was an evil monster dog. Now, I'm not scared of dogs now. Well, not much. But that influenced me for the rest of my life. Now, if it had been another situation where a nice dog had come up and nuzzled up against me and, and I'd sort of cuddled it, and it would have changed my whole outlook on dogs. So lots of things that happen when you're a child will shape you going forward. So let's just identify very quickly, maybe for a couple of minutes, the kind of things that can influence us. What about name calling? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Now, most psychologists would say that's rubbish, because actually they do. And they can shape you, or they can humiliate you, they can hold you down, they can hold you back from being the kind of person that you're meant to be. Now, I want to read this to you, and this is an actual, what somebody's written, a girl has written, on a discussion site on the internet. And I'm going to read it to you. And I really honestly believe this isn't just her story. I think it's many people's story. Just we don't get to hear all of this. This is what she wrote. She wrote, "I don't remember much about my mother, but I remember spiteful things she said to me. This is what she told me right before she left when I was 13. She said, 'I never loved you. I don't really care about what happens to you. I never wanted you in the first place. You were such a huge mistake. If I could live my life again, I never would have had you. You are worthless, and no one will ever love you because you're a,'" I'm not going to repeat that word, "and no one loves a," again, I'm not going to repeat that word, No one would care if you died. No one will ever care. Those are exact words, she writes, burned into my brain, never to be forgotten. I mean, can you imagine being in that situation at a vulnerable age, hearing your own mother speak those words? And yet so many have come under that kind of verbal abuse from parents, ones who they should trust, should be able to rely on, should be able to depend on, should get encouragement from, and yet so often we find in our society that we get just these kind of things happening to so many young people. Sticks and stones. Psychologists tell us that we often carry around with us through life bags that our parents used. In other words, we carry the same patterns or dysfunctions. And if our father was an absent father, there's a tendency for us to grow up and be an absent father. There's, again, a tendency that if our father was an alcoholic, that we'll have a tendency to follow the same pattern. If our father was an abuser, again, there's a tendency that we could end up being an abuser. Often we seem to, as it were, carry on a cycle which shapes the generations to come. And this often happens in family life. Baggage which we put on and then we put on someone else. It's terrible, the influence really that our children and our young people are under in the society in which we live. I remember when I was growing up, it was a long time ago, I know, but I was at junior school. They did have those in those days. I did get an education of sorts. And there was a friend of mine who was a couple of years older, actually, kind of in a different stream, but we were good friends, went around with a group of friends. And he was really cool. In fact, when he got to sort of his early teens, he dressed and looked like Mark Bolan. Anybody remember Mark Bolan? Yes! Thank you, Beryl. Remember we used to have T-Rex's drummer here? Mark Bolan was the singer. Anyway, he had his hair sort of like whoosh, and he used to dress really cool and just paint on his face and all sorts of things. So, yeah, he was a really cool guy, and I thought, wow, that's a great guy. I'd like to be like him. And then he started spending his summer holidays and Easter holidays because his parents were sick, and spending some time with his uncle. He used to really enjoy at his uncle's house. And you know what? I suddenly saw character and personality change going on, and I thought, he's not the guy that he used to be. And I couldn't understand what was going on. It wasn't till years later that I found out that his uncle was grooming him and abusing him. And what happened was, because he was at a certain age, which of course is very influential age, 11, 12, 13, it ended up that he himself started living a homosexual lifestyle. And that was caused through the baggage that was being put on him by his uncle. And it's a terrible thing to see in life, the kind of baggage that's put on people, the kind of baggage that people then put on others. And we could think of a whole host of experiences that maybe you've been through, and you can think right now of things that have been put on you by other people. It may not have something that you've taken on board, it's been put on you. And maybe it was words that were spoken over you, words that were negative, words saying that you will never amount to anything, you will never achieve anything, that you were useless, you were worthless, that you weren't wanted. All those kind of things. It's quite common to have that spoken over people. And that can have a detrimental effect on your future, on your self-esteem, and what you're going to achieve as a person. If you have an encouraging words put over you, it's amazing how well you can achieve, how long you can travel on that kind of fuel, the fuel of encouragement. So all sorts of things happen. Families break up, divorces, children going through a divorce. It doesn't matter what they say, children are always affected. And it may not be affected as in traumatized and needing some counseling, although I think that's often the case. It may be even a mistrust of marriage. And I've seen where there's been a divorce in a family, that the children don't get married. They just don't consider it. And underlying there is this mistrust, is I don't want to end up that way, arguing with husband or wife or whatever, and putting my kids through that kind of stuff. So all of these things we can pick up in our lives, and even when we become Christians and get into a church environment and we can make a commitment to Christ, sometimes we still carry the baggage. And that can inhibit us, that can stop us from being the kind of people that God wants us to be. He knows your traumas, he knows the things that you go through, but he has a plan for you so that you can be the very best you can ever be. And the only way that can happen is if we deal with what we're carrying.